In this video, we'll see the behavior of the around advice. I have just copied the same method or the advice as was from the earlier code. I have also added the before advice as well, just for the test. Let's start the application. When I try to create an order, we'll be able to see here the same order of execution as we have seen in our previous videos around start, and then the before advice gets executed, then our business logic which is there in this controller, and then around end takes place. What I'm going to do here is I'll just comment this part and return null, save. Let's try to create the order. Here you see that we do not have any response. In a sense, the response is null. And the reason is we are returning null from our around advice. Also, you can see here that only around start and around end gets executed. There is no execution of our before advice, as well as no execution of our actual business logic, which means this part of the code, the proceed method call from the join point, was responsible for our further executions, which means if we do not have this part in our around advice, the around advice implementation is of no use. And that can be seen from our aspect J around advice class. If you remember, the invoke method of aspect J around advice class is responsible for the invocation of our around advice method. And here what it does, it returns the invoke advice method. It doesn't do anything else apart from this. And that's the reason whatever we need to do or whatever happens in our around advice method is responsible for the further invocation. So this is very important for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to revert this and delete the before advice. Let me see what happens if we just send something like success, because around advice method is responsible for the return object of our request. I have just save and execute. It throws an exception. So what does the exception say here? It's trying to cast the string to the order, which means whenever we are trying to invoke the creation method from the controller, it returns the object of type order. And if our around advice tries to send any other type apart from the order, this is going to give us the error. Now let us see if we can use the around advice method as a single advice method that could replace the other advices. In a sense, can we use only the around advice instead of using several different advice methods? What I have done here now is at the start of the around advice method, we are printing around start as usual, and after that whatever code we wanted to write in the before advice can be implemented at this place. This part of the code is responsible for invocation to our business logic. After successful return from this execution, the part of the code which was implemented in after returning can be implemented. For example, if you see, we are setting the ID of the response order object to 4, and under the catch block we can implement the part of the code which we were having in the after throwing. Of course, we can throw from here, and in the finally we can write the part of the code which we had in our after advice, and this part remains as is. Let's save and see. Now if I try to create an order, create, you see here this was the first execution and still we got the order ID as 4. That was because here after returning the ID was set to 4. And if you see the logs, here the order of execution is same as that of the order of execution what we saw in our previous videos. Here you can see around start, before, business logic, after returning, after, and around end. The same thing you will see here in the case of success. And in the case of error, now because only ID 1 is there, if I try to get ID 2, it gives an exception. And if you see the order of execution here for error, start, before, business logic, after throwing, and after, which is same as that of what we have seen in our previous video. Around, before, business logic, after throwing, and after. Which means we can use the around advice method instead of implementing different advice methods, which means we can implement only one advice method, which is around advice method, in which we can implement different advice method at various places, as we have seen here, before, after returning, and all these things. And the good thing of this part of the implementation is we can return from our after throwing part as well. In the after throwing advice, there is no way that we can return something from that method, but here I'm just saying save and execute. So it returns an object with null ID and null items. And that's because here we are creating a new order object. And also you can see the logs after throwing and after. There is no exception thrown here because we are not propagating the exception. We are stopping the exception here itself. And this was the short explanation of the around advice usage. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.